Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at the recent, quite concerning flare-up along the line of control and the international border.
Yes, it follows that tragic attack in Pahalgam on April 22nd, where 26 civilians sadly lost their lives.
And since then, we've seen, 8 straight nights of ceasefire violations?
That's right. It's reportedly the most intense period since the DGMOs reached that understanding back in 2021.
India's responded, of course. The official line is calibrated and proportionate.
And importantly, so far, no reported casualties on the Indian side from these recent exchanges.
Good. But to really understand what's happening now, we need to step back a bit, don't we? This whole ceasefire situation has a history.
It absolutely does. You really have to go back to the Karachi Agreement in 1949, after the First War. That's where the original ceasefire line came from.
Which later became the line of control, the LoC, after the Simla Agreement in '72.
Exactly. And it's crucial, I think, to constantly remember the LoC is a military control line. It's not an agreed-upon international boundary.
That's a point worth emphasizing. And these ceasefires we talk about, like the 2021 understanding, they aren't formal treaties, are they?
No, not at all. They're more like military-level understandings, arrangements maybe, not legally binding international agreements.
Okay, so let's clarify that difference between the LoC and the international border, the IB, because that causes confusion.
It really does. So the LoC, roughly 740 kilometers long, runs from Sangam up to point NJ9842 near Siachen.
Right.
But then as you move towards the Jammu region, things change. For India, south of that point, it becomes the recognized international border.
Because India doesn't lay claim to Pakistan's Punjab province.
Precisely. But from Pakistan's perspective, that same stretch, the IB and Jammu, they often refer to it as a working boundary.
Why the different term?
Well, it stems from their claim over Jammu. They see that border as, let's say, unsettled or disputed.
So that fundamental disagreement over the status of the Jammu border just lingers.
It does, and it makes a truly stable border arrangement much harder to achieve, kind of contributing to these cycles of violations.
And operationally, we're talking about a heavily fortified zone.
Yeah.
Troops, bunkers.
Extremely militarized, yes, on both sides. And the terrain itself, especially with weather changes, snowmelt, and so on, can sometimes shift where the perceived line actually lies on the ground.
So the main job for troops there is preventing infiltration and stopping any side from unilaterally changing things.
That's the mandate. But, the reality, according to the sources, has been an increase in infiltration attempts and these Pakistan Border Action Team, or BAT, raids, particularly since the late 80s.
Despite the mandate. And we have seen ceasefires put back in place informally before, haven't we? Like 2003.
Yes. 2003 was a significant one, and then again in 2021. These show that periods of relative calm are possible, but they tend to be fragile.
So why do these violations happen? You mentioned infiltration, but what else drives it?
Well, historically, especially since '72, violations often ramp up when overall relations between India and Pakistan are strained during a crisis.
It becomes another way to exert pressure.
Kind of. A way to impose military costs, perhaps signal resolve, And these aren't always just minor incidents. They range from small arms fire right up to major cross-border operations.
Like the surgical strikes in 2016.
That's a prominent example, yes. But there's another factor mentioned in the source material, which is interesting.
Oh, what's that?
These autonomous military factors. The idea that sometimes actions might be initiated by local commanders.
Ah, okay. Not necessarily directed from the very top.
Potentially. It could be for various reasons, maybe boosting troop morale, maybe retaliation for a previous incident, or even sort of testing the other side's alertness or response.
And the lack of formal rules probably plays into this.
I think so. There aren't strict treaty-defined rules of engagement. There are unwritten SOPs, standard operating procedures, but that leaves room for interpretation, perhaps miscalculation.
So when things do flare up, how do they try and cool things down?
There are mechanisms. Flag meetings between local commanders on the ground are one.
Right, face to face.
Yes. And then, at a higher level, there's the DGMO hotline. The Director Generals of Military Operations have a direct line.
That must be crucial for de-escalation.
It is vital. It helps manage tensions, reduce the risk of things spiraling out of control quickly. But as we're seeing now, it doesn't always prevent violations from starting.
Let's talk about that 2021 ceasefire understanding then. It felt like a positive step at the time. What was the thinking behind it?
Well, it seems there were strategic calculations on both sides. For Pakistan, they were dealing with significant internal issues, political instability, economic pressure, plus the situation on their Afghan border was demanding attention.
So a quieter LoC's freed up resources and reduced pressure.
Likely, yes. And for India, the main strategic focus around that time had shifted heavily towards the line of actual control, the LAC, with China, especially after the Ladakh standoff.
So stability on the Western Front allowed more focus eastward.
That seems to be the strategic logic. It suggests the understanding was perhaps driven more by immediate needs than a fundamental resolution of underlying issues.
Which might explain why it's breaking down now.
It could be a factor, yes. The calm was welcome, but maybe the core problems weren't addressed.
But the impact, while it lasted, was significant for people living there.
Oh, absolutely. A marked drop in firing incidents. That meant greater safety for civilians, a chance for farming to resume more normally, a bit of economic stability returning to those border villages. It really showed the tangible benefits.
And it's interesting that since diplomatic ties effectively froze in 2019, this military channel, the DGMO communication, has remained active.
It seems to be the primary, maybe the only, consistently active channel, which is why it was significant that India reportedly used the April 29th call to formally object to these latest violations.
It underscores its importance, even when political talks are stalled.
Exactly. It's a vital safety valve, even if it doesn't solve everything. Now, looking at the current situation, post-Pahalgam, what could be Pakistan's calculation?
The source suggests it might be a tactic, keep up the pressure.
Possibly. Maintain military pressure, maybe try to gain some kind of leverage in the current situation. It's hard to know for sure, of course.
And for India, there are immediate challenges. Responding militarily, yes, but also.
There was that incident with the BSF Jawan who accidentally crossed the IB around April 23rd.
Yes, that adds another layer of complexity. In tense times, incidents like that, even if accidental, can become highly sensitive.
Potentially used as leverage.
It's a risk, certainly. And it highlights how, even though we often call these LoC violations low-intensity conflict,
They're high risk.
very high risk. Things can escalate fast, especially if public or political pressure builds up on either side, demanding stronger action.
So if we were to sum this up, the LoC ceasefire isn't really a fixed state, is it? It's more like a dynamic understanding.
That's a good way to put it. A military understanding constantly vulnerable to bigger crises and local factors on the ground.
And the communication channels, the hotline, the flag meetings, they help manage things.
They help manage, yes, they reduce risks, but they don't
Exactly.
guarantee peace. For long-term stability, you'd need something more.
Ultimately, yes. Sustained political will, a clear strategic vision from both sides, is what's needed for any kind of lasting peace. This current flare-up is just another reminder of how fragile things are.
Okay, so for those of you listening, particularly if you're preparing for the UPSC exams, this discussion is highly relevant.
Definitely. It cuts across India-Pakistan relations, border management issues, internal security challenges, all key syllabus areas.
So make sure you grasp the difference between the LoC and the IB. Understand how these agreements or understandings came about and evolved.
And critically, try to analyze the why behind the actions. What are the strategic motivations, the local factors, the historical context? That deeper analysis is important.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider the implications of this situation persisting without a formal, legally binding ceasefire treaty.
Right. Does that inherent lack of formality make these cycles of violence almost inevitable? Is a different approach needed altogether for genuine, lasting peace? Something to think about.
Indeed. We hope this deep dive was useful. If you found it valuable, please do like, subscribe, and feel free to comment with any questions or your own perspectives.
And just a note, our discussion today drew on reporting from the Indian Express.